Humans make mistakes. Humans are negligent. They're well-intentioned, but they often make mistakes. Machines don't make mistakes, right? Maybe the programmers make mistakes, but machines don't make mistakes. And that's why, as a compliance professional, we love automation and compliance. Humans are the weak link.
Hey everyone, and thanks for listening to another episode of the Future of Data Security. Today I'm speaking with Hugo Teufel, Vice President, Deputy General Counsel, and Chief Privacy Officer at Lumen Technologies. Hugo, thanks so much for chatting with me today.
Well, thank you for having me on your program, and thank you to your guests for listening to me today.
So I was looking at your LinkedIn, and you've seen all the movies. Moving from judge advocate to chief privacy officer, you really have a unique career path. I'm curious what sparked your passion for data security and data privacy.
So I think data privacy would come first, and that was my time in government at Department of the Interior as well as Department of Homeland Security, and dealing with federal privacy issues, which led to my being the chief privacy officer at DHS. But data security, really, I'd have to say, again, back in government, 2007 and 8, with the Comprehensive National Cybersecurity Initiative of the Bush administration, and doing the work that we did at that time on securing the federal enclave.
In terms of your military background, which we both share, by the way, how do you feel that has influenced your approach to data security?
That's a tough one, and there are probably some stories that I could tell but won't about my time in uniform and privacy and security issues. I guess what I would say is that and I have a greater appreciation of the national security implications of data security and the importance of securing our networks and the country, right, from cyber criminals and other cyber threat actors.
It's very interesting because obviously conventional threats are defended by the military, but in cyber, it's often private companies that have that remit and need to protect the infrastructure. And what sort of significant shifts have you observed over the past decades? Let's say from the advent of cloud, now we have Gen AI. What are some of the major changes you've seen?
Gosh, that's a tough one. I think the big one really has been in the making for some time, and that is the realization that we live in a digital economy, a global digital economy. Really, it's a global digital marketplace, right? So it is not unusual to talk with friends overseas, great distances, right? And we're doing so through digital platforms. And a lot of talk about the fourth industrial revolution, and some would say, arguably, that we're in the fifth industrial revolution, or maybe even sixth industrial revolution. But I'm not sure that the general public has caught up to the fact that we live in the digital world far more than we realize, and that's important, right? Because all of our information is digitized and is available for good or for bad.
And in terms of that fifth or sixth industrial revolution, AI-driven era, what are some of the key risks that you're seeing?
Well, first, let me say, I don't know that we know all of the risks with respect to AI. Certainly there are governments that want to regulate AI. I can get why they do, but we fully don't understand AI and the things that it can do. And so I have to call out the NIST AI Risk Management Framework. It's a great start. It is the framework that we use at my company when looking at AI. And we need to be aware of and mindful of the implications of the use of the new technology, and understand that while we've identified some risks with respect to AI, we don't know them all yet.
Can you share a cybersecurity challenge or a data security challenge related to AI that caught you off guard recently and how you tackled it?
You may be surprised at this, and this may not be what you're looking for, but I think in companies, and I'm speaking generally, in companies, we always run the risk of shadow IT, and shadow AI is no different, right? So understanding all of the various use cases of AI at a company is very important. And so one often sees, when thinking about AI governance and compliance, the first thing that you need to do is to know all of the ways that AI is being used at your company. And that's not too different from privacy, right? Because you start off with knowing all of the assets that are processing personal information, and that allows you to build that data inventory, or if you prefer the European terminology, records of processing activities. And in the privacy sphere, right, it's that record, those records of processing activities that are the heart of a privacy compliance program. So with respect to AI, you really can't ensure that you have proper security in place for AI until you know every use of AI at your company or your organization. So maybe not what you're looking for, but it's fundamental to security of AI and the data that AI is using.
Do you have any special thoughts on shadow AI? I know that's an emerging theme, although organizations may have what they think is visibility. They're blocking certain applications. A lot of employees may still be using all kinds of solutions.
Right. So with respect to employees using AI, it's no different than employees using their personal computers to do work at home. And the significance there is if you don't have the proper security measures in place on your home computer, if you allow files that may have sensitive information, and not just personal information, but company information, to be stored on a home computer, and there isn't adequate security, mischief can ensue, right? So there are things that you can do working on a home computer, but I think we've gotten better, right, in the US and in private sector in terms of how individuals work with their home computers. So that's one issue without question. What I'm thinking about more is the function or the business unit. Some organization or sub-organization within the company is using AI and has a license, right? Has purchased the service and is doing something that the privacy office, the security office, and the IT office don't know about. That's a bigger area, right? I mean, I think especially after COVID, we've gotten a better understanding of how one can work at home, and maybe even how one can work at home virtually on a home computer. And we've dealt with the security issues. There will always be issues within the private sector and maybe the public sector as well, where somebody has made a decision to use AI and not clear it with the folks that it needs to be cleared by. And so there hasn't been a proper assessment of the risks associated with that particular tool.
What role does employee training play in overall data security strategies, either in your organizations or in some other organizations you've been a part of?
Oh, it's critical. Absolutely critical. The majority of incidents that occur, I shouldn't say majority, a plurality at least, of incidents that occur are because of human action or inaction. So training is critical to address that. And you have to do it, you have to do it constantly because people forget. Right. And so it's whether remembering to put the right labels on a document so that you've got proper security and the automated tools can do their thing, whether it's doing phishing campaigns or training campaigns internally so that employees know what a phishing attempt looks like. Those skills they're important and they're perishable, and you have to remind employees regularly. Humans make mistakes. Humans are negligent. They're well-intentioned, but they often make mistakes. Machines don't make mistakes, right? Maybe the programmers make mistakes, but machines don't make mistakes. And that's why, as a compliance professional, we love automation and compliance. Humans are the weak link.
You've seen firsthand in your background in the defense and military sector how much is invested in training. And I'm curious how your transition between government defense to the private sector has changed your perspective on data security, just admitting now that humans are part of that weak link.
First of all, I have to tell you, I thought a lot of the training when I was in uniform was just too much. And, when you serve in the military or you work in government, if there's training on some subject, that means one or more than one people did something wrong. Right. So there's a reason for that training. Somebody made a mistake somewhere. So you definitely can overdo training, or maybe have too much training. And I know that the military has been looking at how they can pare that down. In the private sector, the issue becomes one of productivity. And when you think about the number of people in an organization who are doing training and the number of hours that they're spending, it can be a significant cost to the company. And so there's always a desire within leadership of companies to look to pare down the amount of training so that it's essential and not more than is necessary, because there is a real cost to a company in having to do a lot of training. So it's important to do the necessary training for everybody at the company, but also focus on those groups that have particular roles that would require additional training or different training, so that they can better understand the issues and they can better do their jobs as a result.
We can all probably agree that training has a huge cost, obviously. So how do you then measure the success of a privacy program, and in particular in a global technology company?
I think there are a few ways that you can measure success. I mean, of course, there's always metrics. And the issue there is to have the right metrics in place to be able to demonstrate to leadership the things that you've done and how you've added value. I would say as well that success for a privacy office in a company can also be measured by the privacy office's involvement in decision making, or as advisors to leaders in decision making, and the connections that the office has within the business. And so I mean, I probably could have just started this off with, well, there's quantitative and qualitative ways to measure success, right? And so if a privacy office is successful, one is doing privacy by design or privacy engineering, right? The products and services that a company brings to the market have considered the privacy implications, not at the end, which often is the case, but during the process of coming up with that new product or that new service. So that's definitely a way of demonstrating success. But I've got to say, for anyone who is listening to us right now and maybe is in a privacy office role, what I really want to stress is critical to the success of a privacy office is being aligned with the risk appetite of leadership. You can be the best privacy professional in the world, but if you're not aligned with the risk appetite of your risk oversight committee, of your senior leaders, you're going to be mismatched, and you're going to lose credibility with your leadership, because you have a different tolerance for risk than the leadership does, right? You've got to be aligned with your leadership on that very important issue.
That's a very good point. And going back to privacy by design, can you provide a little bit more color around what is it? What are the key elements? Why is it so valuable in today's environment?
Well, I would refer the folks listening to us right now to look up Ann Cavoukian. She was the privacy commissioner for Ontario, and she came up with privacy by design. I want to say, I haven't memorized them. I'm terribly sorry. I think 7 principles that Ann elucidates in her books on the subject, so I would refer you to that. But the significance of privacy by design and privacy engineering, and I've got to give a shout out to Michelle Dennedy and Nishant Bahajaria for the work that they have done on privacy engineering. The significance is that since we live in a digital marketplace, in a global environment, global digital environment and marketplace, where everything is digital, it is important to have privacy involved early on, to think about the implications of what we're doing and how we're doing it, so that proper decisions are made early on and the coding aligns with the issues raised by technical and legal privacy reviews of a product or service that's brought to the marketplace, right? So that the company has thought about the privacy issues before it brings that product into the marketplace. And we've seen that time and again with tech companies, right, especially early on, that just weren't thinking about it, right? They were wanting to go to marketplace, go fast, break stuff, okay, break stuff, and then you have enforcement actions brought against you. And people care about privacy now, right? So your customers will be looking at, what are you doing and how are you protecting my data?
Do you have any thoughts or prediction on this whole new world of large language models, and obviously some of the companies out there scraping the internet? Is it fair use? Is it not? Any thoughts on that emerging topic?
I'm not an intellectual property lawyer. I'm a cyber and privacy lawyer, but I can appreciate the legal ramifications of collecting data without notice and consent. Certainly, the European regulators have been looking at these issues. We've seen some litigation here in the United States over that subject, and so as a privacy professional, I would say, well, especially when it comes to personal information, have you given notice? Have you obtained consent if it's required? Is this a secondary use, which is something that we as privacy professionals don't like? Having said that, fully appreciate that in order to reap the benefits of AI, the data is necessary to train, and I'll leave it at that.
Talking about the global workspace, how do you navigate the complexities of international data privacy regulations, multiple jurisdictions?
Well, a few things that one could say about that. First is, if your privacy program is built on a framework, a principles-based framework, you will likely be in pretty good compliance with most privacy laws around the world. And that's important because there is so much going on, and there has been for the last 6 or 7 years, that frankly, privacy professionals around the world are fatigued because of all of the new things that come out. And one may not be able to stay on top of every jurisdiction, every applicable jurisdiction's privacy laws. So you start with a principles-based framework. So that may be the OECD principles, that may be the NIST privacy framework. I happen to like the AICPA privacy management framework. And there are plenty of consultancies that will provide you with their proprietary frameworks, but you start there, right? So then you need to look at, okay, what are the jurisdictions that are going to matter for me? When GDPR hit, folks were all about GDPR readiness, and I was at Raytheon at the time, and to get money, we said, yeah, we're gonna do GDPR readiness. And then I turned to my team and I said, no, we're not. We're going to do a global privacy program. We're going to focus on GDPR, but we're going to build a global privacy program. You can't, as I said before, you can't chase every privacy law. And you don't necessarily want to in the case of GDPR, unless you're a European business or doing business solely in the European Union. You've got to think about other jurisdictions as well. I hearken back to, we're in a global economy, a global digital economy. So it's not just the Europeans, it's the Americans, it's APAC, right? It's the Middle East. We see privacy laws sprouting up everywhere, right? And even in Latin America, I don't want to miss any area, Latin America and Africa as well. So you can't capture them all. A good framework will help you out. And a good analysis of the laws that are the most important to you, you need to do up front, right, before you build out that compliance program.
Are there any common misconceptions or erroneous thinking that you're seeing over and over in data privacy?
Only with Europeans. And what I mean by that is, I'm going to use the Germans and GDPR again, right? After GDPR came out, in the German and Austrian press, there was a lot of talk about, well, now we have to take our names off of mailboxes. Well, no, you don't, right? And again, I can think back to my time at Raytheon, where I would have a conversation with the European, sometimes the French, sometimes the Germans, and they would say, well, I would ask, could I have your work email? Could I have your work phone number? And they'd say, well, I don't have to give you that. GDPR doesn't allow you to have that. And I'd say, well, hold on. That's not what the law says. And so let's talk about what it is there. But it brings me to an interesting point, and one that Americans fail to appreciate, and that is you really need to understand the cultural differences. So in the United States, we worry about what the government does with our data, but we'll give up all sorts of information to get a discount. The Europeans that have experienced, in a few cases, really bad things that happened when governments had access to personal data and then used that data to persecute or murder millions of people, and they seem to be more comfortable giving data to their governments, but not to business. And so one has to appreciate when one is operating in a global space, and one has affiliates around the world. But even if one doesn't, if one's doing business in various parts of the world, and end users happen to use your product, they will have a different view of your product and the data that's collected and the security that you may be using than you do. You need to understand that.
That's such a valid point, because depending on the jurisdiction, some users, especially in the consumer space, scroll down, accept everything. Of course.
Well, we can always, have a class action suit against the company later.
That's right. You have a pretty unique career path. If you were to give advice to a younger version of yourself, or maybe someone that's getting started in the space, what are the top pieces of advice you would share?
I fell into this, so in some ways I'm a poor choice for someone to ask, but since you asked, it's the future. I mean, it's the present, but it's also the future. So I was thinking of a movie from the '60s, right? Asking for advice and somebody says it's plastic. Well, it's cyber and privacy. It's the digital marketplace. When I went to law school, there weren't privacy courses, and some law schools now lump privacy in with IP law. They're different fields. I would take privacy courses. I would take cyber courses. I would look to break in to one or either profession after getting my undergraduate degree. I probably would suggest getting a graduate degree. Would strongly urge serving in the military or working in government for a period of time, right? And I'm being broad here. So whether you're a cybersecurity professional or you're a privacy professional, and they're different tracks. I strongly believe in public service, but I note that there are things that you can do in the public sector that you may not be able to do or not do early on in your career in the private sector. And so serving your country, serving the public, gaining valuable skills, and maybe even a security clearance, which in the cyber field can be very helpful. You can do that much more easily in the public sector.
Very good points. Unfortunately, Hugo, that's all the time we're going to have to cover today. Before we part ways, if people want to follow along with your work, what's the best place for them to go?
Probably LinkedIn.
LinkedIn's an all-time favorite, right?
Right. I mean, I'm on X, but I rarely post there, and almost always, if I do, it's if I'm at a conference or some other event.
You don't strike me as a big TikTok guy.
No, I wouldn't have that app on my phone.
Amazing. Well, this has been a really fun conversation, and I've learned a lot. Thank you, and let's keep in touch.
Absolutely. Thank you so very much.